The cold Montana wind whipped across Anna Redfield's porch as she clutched her mother's tattered shawl around her shoulders, staring out at the vast emptiness of what was once a promising homestead. Only that morning, she had buried her husband beneath the lone pine tree that marked the eastern edge of their property, the same tree where they had shared their first kiss 3 years earlier. The year was 1879, and Ely, Montana was little more than a collection of weathered buildings clinging to the edge of the frontier, a place where dreams either took root or withered away. For Anna, at 26, it seemed her dreams had done the latter. Thomas had been gone less than a day, but the crushing weight of her new reality pressed down upon her chest like the heavy stones they'd used to mark his grave. "Come on, Maybelle," she whispered to the brown and white cow that stood patiently in the small corral. "You and I are all that's left now." Anna's dark auburn hair, usually tucked neatly beneath a bonnet, fell loose around her shoulders as she made her way to the barn. The pneumonia had taken Thomas quickly, leaving her with nothing but a half-built cabin, 10 acres of unplanted land, a milk cow, and debts she couldn't possibly repay. The homestead had been Thomas's dream, a place of their own after years of him working other men's land. They'd arrived in spring with plans to build a life, maybe start a family. Now winter approached, and Anna had no idea how she would survive it alone. She rested her forehead against Maybelle's warm flank as she milked her, letting tears fall freely. "What am I going to do?" she whispered to the cow. There was no family to return to back east. They'd spent their last dollar getting to Montana, convinced the future awaited them here. The milk pail was only half full. Even Maybelle seemed to be giving up. A week passed, then another. Anna rationed her meager supplies, wondering how long she could hold on. The cabin walls, only partially chinked against the cold, let in whistling drafts that made the single candle flicker wildly at night. She'd sold Thomas's pocket watch in town for a sack of flour and some coffee, but the money wouldn't stretch far. She was returning from town one afternoon, the empty wagon rattling beneath her, when she spotted a rider approaching from the north. Visitors were rare out this way, and Anna felt a flutter of alarm. A woman alone was vulnerable on the frontier. She slowed the wagon, one hand moving to the small Derringer pistol she kept in her pocket. Thomas's insistence, though she'd never fired it. The rider came closer, and Anna could see he was tall, his broad shoulders beneath a worn leather coat. He rode with the easy confidence of a man at home in the saddle. As he neared, he removed his hat, revealing hair the color of sun-bleached wheat. "Madam," he called, his voice carrying on the wind. "Might I have a word?" Anna pulled the wagon to a stop, keeping her hand on the Derringer. "State your business, mister." He reined in his horse, a handsome chestnut gelding, and kept a respectful distance. "Name's Clayton Keller. I've been working the Nelson place north of here." His eyes, blue as a summer sky, met hers directly. "Word in town is you're out here alone since your husband passed. Thought I might offer my services." Anna's grip tightened on the pistol. "Services?" Clayton Keller raised his hands slightly. "Not like that, madam. I mean honest work. Your land needs planting if you're to have any crop come spring. Winter's coming fast, and that cabin needs finishing." "I can't pay you," Anna said bluntly. "We spent everything getting here. There's nothing left." Clayton nodded slowly. "I figured as much. I'm not looking for money." "Then what do you want?" Suspicion colored her voice. "A place to winter." He gestured toward the horizon. "Nelson's letting me go. Ranch is struggling, and he can't keep me on. I've got some seed I've been saving, tools of my own, and I know how to work land. I need somewhere to stay until spring, and you need help. Seems we might solve each other's problems." Anna studied him. He looked to be in his early 30s, with a weathered face that spoke of years outdoors. There was something steady in his gaze, lacking the predatory gleam she'd learned to recognize in some men's eyes. "Why would you help a stranger?" Clayton shifted in his saddle. "My ma was left widowed with 3 children when I was 10. Neighbor helped us survive that first winter. I'm just paying it forward, as she would say." Anna hesitated. Having a man at the homestead would invite talk, but starvation was a more immediate concern than reputation. "You sleep in the barn," she said finally. "And if I catch you anywhere near my cabin after dark, you'll find out I'm handy with this." She patted her pocket where the derringer rested. A slight smile curved his lips. "Yes, madam, I'll keep to the barn." That was how Clayton Keller came to Anna Redfield's homestead, bringing with him seed for planting, tools that Thomas had been too poor to purchase, and something Anna had nearly forgotten: hope. The first day, Clayton set to work before dawn, repairing the corral that had begun to sag in places. Anna watched from the cabin window, suspicion still threading through her thoughts. He worked steadily, efficiently, pausing only to wipe sweat from his brow despite the cool autumn air. By midday, Anna's curiosity overcame her wariness. She brought him a cup of water, standing a careful distance away as she extended it. "Thank you, madam," he said, drinking deeply. "Anna," she corrected. "If you're going to be working here, you might as well use my name." "Anna," he nodded, handing back the cup without touching her fingers. "That corral won't hold through a Montana winter. The posts weren't set deep enough." "Thomas did his best," she said defensively. Clayton's expression softened. "I meant no disrespect. It takes time to learn these things." He glanced toward the half-finished cabin. "I could shore up those walls too, if you'd allow it. Get some proper chinking in before the first snow." "Why are you really here, Mr. Keller?" Anna asked abruptly. "Clayton," he countered with a small smile, "and I told you I need a place, you need help." "There must be other places that could use help, places that could pay you," he shrugged. "Maybe, but Reverend Mills mentioned your situation when I was in town looking for work, said you had good land that would go to waste if someone didn't help." His eyes met hers. "I've been working other men's land my whole life, thought maybe this time I could work land that matters." There was something in his voice that resonated with her, a longing for purpose, perhaps. Anna found herself nodding. "The cabin needs the most work," she admitted. "I can't keep the cold out." "I'll start there tomorrow," Clayton promised. "For today, I'll finish this corral so your cow stays put." That night, Anna added an extra potato to the pot, carrying a bowl of stew out to the barn after darkness had fallen. She found Clayton by lantern light, arranging a makeshift bed in the small loft. "Brought you some supper," she said, standing at the foot of the ladder. He climbed down, accepting the bowl with a nod of thanks. "This is kind of you. It's not much. It's hot food I didn't have to cook myself." "That makes it a feast." He took a spoonful, closing his eyes briefly in appreciation. "You've got a good hand with seasoning." Anna felt an unexpected flush of pleasure at the compliment. "It's just salt and some dried herbs, still good." He ate a few more bites, then asked, "How long were you and your husband here before?" 6 months, Anna replied, wrapping her shawl tighter against the evening chill. "We came in April. Thomas took ill in September, died last month." Clayton nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." The words were automatic, worn smooth by repetition. She'd heard them from everyone in town, usually accompanied by pitying looks or not-so-subtle suggestions that she couldn't manage alone. "What was your plan? For the homestead, I mean." Anna leaned against the barn door. "Thomas wanted wheat mainly, some vegetables for us, eventually cattle when we could afford them." She smiled sadly. "He had big dreams." "Good dreams," Clayton said. "Land like yours with the creek running through the north section, it could support those dreams." "You've been looking at my land. Rode the boundaries this morning before you were up. Hope you don't mind." Anna frowned slightly. "I suppose not, though a warning would have been appreciated." "Fair enough," he acknowledged. "Tomorrow I'll let you know my comings and goings." There was an awkward silence, broken only by the scrape of the spoon against the bowl. "Well," Anna said finally, "I should get back to the cabin." Clayton handed her the empty bowl. "Thank you for the meal. I'll start on the cabin walls at first light." True to his word, Clayton began work on the cabin as dawn broke. Anna emerged to find him splitting logs to make proper chinking material, his steady rhythm punctuating the quiet morning. She watched for a moment, noting the strength in his shoulders as he swung the axe. Thomas had been slender, a scholar at heart who'd turned to farming out of necessity rather than inclination. Clayton was clearly a man accustomed to physical labor, his movements efficient and practiced. "There's coffee," she called, turning quickly as he looked up. Over the next few days, they settled into a cautious routine. Anna tended to Maybelle and the small tasks around the homestead while Clayton worked on reinforcing the cabin. She marveled at how quickly the drafts disappeared as he filled the gaps between logs with a mixture of clay, straw, and stones. "Where did you learn to do all this?" she asked one afternoon, bringing him water as he worked. Clayton wiped his brow with his sleeve. "My pa was a carpenter before he tried farming, taught me some before he passed. The rest I picked up working ranches from Texas to Montana. You've traveled a lot. Never stayed anywhere longer than a season or two." He took a drink of water, his gaze drifting to the distant mountains. "Always chasing something better, I suppose. And did you find it?" A slight smile touched his lips. "Not yet, but the view keeps improving." Anna wasn't sure if he meant the Montana landscape or something else entirely, but she felt her cheeks warm all the same. As October gave way to November, the first snow dusted the ground, melting by midday but serving as a warning of what was to come. Clayton had finished reinforcing the cabin walls and moved on to building a proper woodshed attached to the side of the structure. "We'll need twice what you've got stored," he explained, measuring boards. "Montana winters are no joke." Anna noticed his use of "we" but didn't comment. Instead, she asked, "Do you think we'll have enough time before the real snows come? If we work fast, I'll cut you stack." They spent the next 3 days gathering wood from the stand of trees that bordered the eastern edge of the property. Anna worked alongside him, learning to identify the best trees for burning, how to stack the wood to allow for proper drying. On the third day, as they worked side by side, Anna found herself studying Clayton's profile: the strong jaw, the small scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he concentrated. "You're staring," he said without looking at her. Anna quickly averted her gaze. "I was just wondering where you got that scar." Bull decided he didn't like the look of me. Clayton smiled. "I was 16 and thought I knew everything about cattle. He set me straight. You were lucky he didn't kill you." "Luck's had a hand in keeping me alive more times than I care to count." He paused, setting down his axe. "What about you? What brought you all the way out here from? Where was it?" "Pennsylvania," Anna replied. "Thomas had a cousin who wrote about the opportunities out west. Said a man could claim land, build something of his own." She sighed. It sounded better than watching Thomas work himself to death in the factory for pennies. "You loved him very much." It wasn't a question, but Anna answered anyway. "I did. He was kind, gentle. Always dreaming of better things for us." She picked up another log, adding it to the stack. "When he proposed, he promised me a garden full of roses someday." Clayton nodded thoughtfully. "Good man to have dreams like that." "Yes, he was." Anna felt the familiar pang of grief, but it was softer now, muted by the passage of time and the immediate concerns of survival. That evening, after a simple supper of beans and cornbread, Clayton lingered at the cabin table, sketching something on a scrap of paper. "What's that?" Anna asked, washing the dishes in a basin by the stove. "Planting plan for spring," he replied, not looking up. "If we put wheat here," he pointed to the western section, "and vegetables closer to the cabin, you'll have a good start. The soil's rich by the creek, perfect for a garden." Anna dried her hands on her apron, moving to look over his shoulder. The proximity brought his scent to her: leather, pine, and something uniquely him. She stepped back quickly. "You're planning as if you'll be here," she observed. Clayton looked up, his blue eyes meeting hers. "I'm planning as if you'll be here. Whether I am or not, you should know what to do come planting time." Anna felt an unexpected twist of disappointment at the thought of him leaving. Over the past weeks, his presence had become oddly comforting: the sound of his axe in the morning, his quiet footsteps around the property, the low hum of his voice when he spoke to Maybelle. "Will you stay through planting?" The question slipped out before she could reconsider. Something flickered in his eyes: surprise, perhaps, or something warmer. "If you want me to." "The work would go faster with two," she said pragmatically, though that wasn't the only reason she hoped he would stay. "True enough." Clayton folded the paper, handing it to her. "Think on where you want things. It's your land, after all." His fingers brushed hers as she took the paper, and Anna felt a small jolt at the contact. She pulled her hand back quickly, tucking the paper into her pocket. "It's getting late," she said, moving toward the door. "Thank you for your help today." Clayton stood, reaching for his hat. "My pleasure, Anna." He paused at the threshold. "Sleep well." Anna watched from the window as he made his way to the barn, his lantern a bobbing point of light in the darkness. For the first time since Thomas's death, she didn't feel utterly alone. December arrived with a vengeance, bringing a blizzard that howled around the cabin for 3 days straight. Anna was profoundly grateful for Clayton's work on the walls. Where once the wind would have found every crack and crevice, now the cabin remained relatively warm, heated by the small stove. Clayton had moved his bedroll to the floor of the main room for the duration of the storm, despite Anna's initial protests. "You'll freeze to death in that barn," she'd argued when he first suggested it. "The temperature's dropping by the hour." "I don't want to impose," he'd replied, standing awkwardly in the doorway, snow melting on his shoulders. Anna had sighed in exasperation. "Mr. Keller, I'm not about to let you die of cold because of propriety. You can sleep by the stove, just keep to your side of the room." Now, on the 3rd day of the storm, Anna found herself oddly comfortable with his presence in the small cabin. They had fallen into a rhythm. He tended the fire and checked on Maybelle in the barn during brief lulls in the storm, while Anna cooked and mended clothing. In the evenings, they sat by the light of the single kerosene lamp, Clayton whittling pieces of wood into small animals while Anna read aloud from one of the few books she'd brought west. "That's a fine story," Clayton commented as she closed The Three Musketeers after reading a chapter. "Never had much schooling myself, but I do enjoy a good tale." Anna placed a ribbon to mark the page. "You never learned to read." "Some," he admitted. "Enough to get by. Numbers come easier to me than letters." "I could teach you," Anna offered, then immediately wondered if she'd overstepped. "If you'd like, that is." Clayton looked up from the small wooden horse taking shape in his hands. "I'd like that very much." The storm passed, leaving behind 4 feet of snow and a strange intimacy between them. Clayton returned to the barn, but each evening he joined Anna for supper in the cabin, and afterward they would sit together as she helped him practice his letters. Christmas approached, and Anna found herself wondering what small gift she might prepare for Clayton. She had little to offer, but the idea of acknowledging the day seemed important somehow. On Christmas Eve, she baked a small pie with the last of the dried apples she'd brought from town, setting it aside for their supper. When Clayton came in from feeding Maybelle, she noticed he seemed nervous, his hands fidgeting with his hat brim. "Something wrong?" she asked, setting the table. "No," he replied quickly. "Just, I have something for you for Christmas." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small wooden object. Anna took it, turning it over in her hands. It was a rose carved with exquisite detail, each petal delicately shaped. "Since I can't give you a real garden yet," Clayton said softly, "thought this might do for now." Anna's throat tightened at his words, not just the gift itself, but the yet that suggested a future and the memory of her confession about Thomas's promise. "It's beautiful," she whispered, running her finger along the wooden petals. "Thank you. Merry Christmas, Anna." She looked up to find him watching her, his eyes warm in the lamplight. "Merry Christmas, Clayton." That night, after he'd gone back to the barn, Anna placed the wooden rose on the small shelf beside her bed, her mind turning over his words, "A real garden yet." As if he planned to stay, to help make Thomas's promise come true. The thought should have troubled her. She was still a widow in mourning, after all, but instead, it filled her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the crackling stove. January brought bitter cold but clear skies. Clayton spent the days repairing tools and making plans for spring planting. He'd brought seeds with him: wheat, corn, beans, and vegetable seeds carefully wrapped in oilcloth, a treasure on the frontier. One evening, as they sat reviewing the planting plan, Anna asked the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Where did you get the seeds? They must have cost a fortune." Clayton's hands stilled on the paper. "They were payment for work I did last harvest." Farmer couldn't pay in cash, so he offered seed instead. "You could have sold them in town for a good price." "I could have," he agreed, "but money gets spent. Seeds." He looked up, meeting her eyes. Seeds become something more. The depth of meaning in his words hung between them. Anna looked away first, her heart beating a rapid rhythm against her ribs. "I should check on Maybelle before turning in," Clayton said, rising from the table. Anna nodded, still not trusting her voice. After he'd gone, she pressed her hands to her heated cheeks, wondering when exactly Clayton Keller had begun to mean more to her than simply a helper on her homestead. February brought with it a new challenge. A band of wolves, driven by hunger, began prowling around the homestead at night. Clayton took to keeping his rifle closer at hand, and Anna grew increasingly concerned about Maybelle. "We should move her into the cabin," she suggested one morning after they'd found wolf tracks circling the barn. Clayton shook his head. "She won't fit through the door and she needs the space of the stall. I'll sleep in the barn with her until the wolves move on." "That's too dangerous," Anna protested. "I've dealt with wolves before." His tone left no room for argument. That night, Anna lay awake listening to the distant howling. Concern for Clayton kept her from sleep, and when she heard a rifle shot ring out, she was on her feet immediately, pulling on her boots and wrapping a shawl around her nightdress. She rushed toward the barn, lantern in hand, heart pounding. "Clayton," she called, pushing open the barn door. He stood at the far end, rifle still raised, Maybelle mooing nervously in her stall. "Stay inside," he ordered, his voice tense. "There are at least 3 of them out there." Anna moved closer instead. "Are you hurt?" "No, just keeping them away from the cow." He glanced at her, his expression softening slightly at the worry evident on her face. "I told you I'd handle it. And I told you it was dangerous," she countered, moving to stand beside him. A low growl sounded outside, and Clayton raised his rifle again. "Anna, please, go back to the cabin. I'm not leaving you out here alone." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his gaze. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met, so I've been told." She managed a small smile. They spent the night in the barn together, taking turns keeping watch. By dawn, the wolves had retreated, likely discouraged by Clayton's shots and the lack of easy prey. As the first light of day filtered through the barn boards, Anna found herself sitting beside Clayton on a hay bale, their shoulders nearly touching. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for protecting Maybelle, for everything you've done here." Clayton turned to look at her, weariness etched in the lines of his face but warmth in his eyes. "Nowhere else I'd rather be." The simple honesty in his words caught Anna off guard. Before she could respond, he stood, stretching his tall frame. "We should get some breakfast." Going to be a long day. But something had changed between them. The pretense that Clayton was merely helping a widow in need had worn thin, revealing something deeper, something neither of them had expected to find. As February gave way to March, the snow began to melt, revealing patches of earth beneath. Clayton spent long hours preparing tools for planting, while Anna took inventory of their supplies. They would need to make a trip to town soon for provisions. "I'll go tomorrow," Clayton offered when she mentioned it. "The trail should be passable now." Anna shook her head. "I'll come with you. I need to see about selling some of Maybelle's milk and butter. We're nearly out of coffee." The real reason she wanted to accompany him was more complicated. Rumors had surely spread about the widow Redfield and the cowboy living on her property. Anna wanted to face them directly, to show that she had nothing to hide. They set out at dawn, the wagon creaking along the muddy trail toward Ely. It was a 3-hour journey, and they passed it in comfortable conversation. Clayton pointing out promising signs of spring, the first green shoots pushing through the melting snow, a pair of eagles circling overhead. Ely was a small settlement, just a general store, a saloon, a church, and a scattering of homes. As they pulled up in front of the general store, Anna felt eyes on them immediately. Mrs. Peterson, the storekeeper's wife, stood on the porch, her expression a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. "Mrs. Redfield," she greeted as Anna climbed down from the wagon, "we wondered if you'd made it through the winter." "As you can see, I have," Anna replied evenly. Mrs. Peterson's gaze shifted to Clayton, who was tying the horses. "With help, I see." "Mr. Keller has been kind enough to assist me with the heavier work," Anna said, keeping her voice neutral. "I've brought butter and cheese to trade." The older woman's expression softened slightly at the mention of butter, a luxury in winter. "Well, come in then. We could use some fresh dairy." Inside, Anna conducted her business while Clayton gathered the supplies they needed. She was aware of the whispers, the curious glances, but held her head high. She was a widow doing what was necessary to survive. There was no shame in that. As they loaded their purchases into the wagon, Reverend Mills approached, his kind face creased with concern. Mrs. Redfield, Mr. Keller, he greeted them. Might I have a word? Anna tensed, but Clayton nodded respectfully. Of course, Reverend. I'm glad to see you both well, the Reverend began, his voice low. But I feel I must mention, there's been talk. People will talk, Anna said stiffly. Mr. Keller sleeps in the barn. He's helping me keep the homestead Thomas and I worked so hard for. I understand, Reverend Mills assured her, but perception matters in a small community like ours. Perhaps if Mr. Keller intends to stay on, there might be a more permanent arrangement to consider. Anna felt her cheeks flush. Reverend, I'm still in mourning for my husband. Clayton cleared his throat. Reverend Mills, I respect your concern, but Mrs. Redfield and I have a proper working arrangement, nothing more. The minister studied them both, then nodded slowly. As you say, I only wish to spare you both unnecessary difficulty. He touched the brim of his hat. Good day to you both. As they drove away from town, Anna could feel tension radiating from Clayton. They were nearly halfway home before he spoke. I'm sorry if my presence is causing you trouble, Anna sighed. It's not your fault. Small towns breed small minds sometimes. Still, he persisted, the Reverend wasn't entirely wrong. I should have considered how it would look. Are you saying you want to leave? The thought sent a sharp pang through Anna's chest. No, his answer was immediate. Unless you want me to. I don't, she admitted, looking straight ahead at the trail. I don't want you to go. Clayton was silent for a long moment. Anna, what the Reverend suggested, a more permanent arrangement, she supplied, her heart quickening. He meant marriage. Yes. Clayton's hands tightened on the reins. I know it's not something you're looking for. Your husband hasn't been gone a year. Anna turned to look at him, studying his profile. What are you looking for, Clayton? You said you've never stayed anywhere more than a season. What's different now? He glanced at her, then back at the road. You, he said simply, this land. For the first time, I feel like I'm building something that matters. The honesty in his voice moved her. I loved Thomas, she said softly. I'll always love him, but he's gone and I'm still here, and so are you. Clayton pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face her fully. Anna, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just want you to know that I'm not planning to leave when spring comes. Not unless you ask me to. Anna reached out, hesitating only a moment before placing her hand over his. Then don't leave. The look in his eyes, hope mingled with something deeper, warmed her from within. They sat there a moment longer, hands touching, a silent understanding passing between them. The rest of the journey passed in companionable silence, both lost in thoughts of what might come next. April brought the true thaw and with it, planting season. From dawn to dusk, Clayton worked the fields, teaching Anna how to prepare the soil, how deep to plant each type of seed. They worked side by side, their rhythm as natural as breathing. One evening, as they washed up after a long day in the fields, Anna found herself studying Clayton's hands, strong, capable hands that had brought life back to her homestead. You're staring again, he said, the corner of his mouth lifting in a small smile. Just thinking, she replied. About how different things would be if you hadn't ridden up that day in October. Different for me too, he said. I'd have moved on looking for the next job, the next place. He dried his hands on a towel. Instead, I found a home. The word hung between them, laden with meaning. Anna felt her heart swell with emotion. Over the past months, Clayton had become more than a helper, more than a friend. He had become essential to her, as necessary as air. Clayton, she began, then hesitated, uncertain how to express the feelings that had been growing within her. He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. Anna, I know it might be too soon. I know you're still healing, but I want you to know. He took a deep breath. I'm falling in love with you. The words, spoken aloud at last, seemed to fill the space between them. Anna felt tears spring to her eyes, not of grief, but of a joy she hadn't expected to feel again. I think, she whispered, I think I'm falling in love with you too. Clayton reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, reverent. May I kiss you? He asked, his voice husky. Anna nodded, her heart thundering in her chest as he leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a soft, tentative kiss. It was brief, tender, a promise rather than a demand. When they parted, Anna saw her own wonder reflected in Clayton's eyes. I should go, he said reluctantly. It's getting late. Yes, she agreed, though part of her wished he would stay. That night, alone in her bed, Anna touched her fingers to her lips, remembering the feeling of Clayton's kiss. For the first time since Thomas's death, she looked toward the future with something more than resignation. She looked toward it with hope. May brought wildflowers to the prairie and the first green shoots in their fields. Clayton had built a small garden plot near the cabin, just as he'd promised, and Anna planted the rose cuttings he'd procured from a woman in town whose garden had survived the winter. "It'll be a few years before they bloom properly," he warned as they worked the soil together. "We have time," Anna replied, and the simple statement felt like a promise. The wheat fields sprouted, vibrant green against the rich dark earth. Each evening, they would walk the boundaries of the planted fields together, Clayton explaining what to expect as the season progressed, Anna listening and learning. Their courtship unfolded slowly, respectfully. Clayton still slept in the barn, but their days were spent in each other's company, and each evening ended with a kiss that grew increasingly tender, increasingly difficult to end. One Sunday in late May, they attended church in Ely together. Anna wore her best dress, the blue one she'd saved for special occasions, and Clayton had trimmed his beard and worn a clean shirt with his best trousers. The whispers still followed them, but they were different now, speculation about intentions rather than impropriety. After the service, Reverend Mills approached them, his expression warmer than it had been during their last encounter. "Mrs. Redfield, Mr. Keller," he greeted them. "It's good to see you both in church today." "Thank you, Reverend," Anna replied. "It's a beautiful day for the journey." "Indeed it is," he glanced between them. "I wonder, Mr. Keller, if you might spare a moment to speak with me privately." Clayton looked to Anna, who nodded her agreement. "I'll wait by the wagon." As she walked away, she could feel eyes following her, but for once she didn't mind. Let them look. Let them see that she was finding happiness again. Clayton joined her a short while later, his expression unreadable. "What did he want?" Anna asked as they climbed into the wagon. Clayton waited until they were on the road before answering. "He asked about my intentions toward you." Anna felt heat rise to her cheeks. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him they were honorable." Clayton glanced at her. "I told him I love you and hope to marry you when you're ready." The directness of his words took her breath away. "You want to marry me?" Clayton pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face her fully. "Anna Redfield, I've loved you since before I knew what was happening. You're the strongest, bravest woman I've ever known. I want to build a life with you on this land. I want to see your garden bloom and our crops grow tall." He took her hand in his. "I want to be your husband if you'll have me." Tears spilled down Anna's cheeks, but she was smiling. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Clayton's face lit with joy. He leaned across the wagon seat, capturing her lips in a kiss that spoke of all the love he felt for her. Anna wound her arms around his neck, returning his kiss with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Clayton rested his forehead against hers. "When?" "Soon," Anna replied. "I don't want to wait much longer." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Ely. Anna wore the same blue dress, adorned with wildflowers Clayton had picked that morning. He stood tall and proud beside her, his voice clear and strong as he spoke his vows. "I, Clayton Keller, take thee, Anna Redfield, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part." Anna's voice trembled slightly as she repeated the same vows, her eyes never leaving Clayton's. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Mills concluded, "I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss your bride." Clayton's kiss was gentle, reverent, a promise of all that was to come. As they walked back down the aisle, Anna caught sight of Mrs. Peterson dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, and even some of the men who had once looked at her, with suspicion, nodded in approval. They celebrated with a small gathering at their homestead afterward, neighbors bringing dishes to share in the time-honored tradition of the frontier. As the sun began to set, the guests departed, leaving the newlyweds alone at last. Standing on the porch, watching the last wagon disappear down the trail, Clayton wrapped his arm around Anna's waist. "Are you happy, Mrs. Keller?" he asked softly. Anna leaned into him, savoring the solid warmth of his body against hers. "Happier than I ever thought I could be again." That night, for the first time, Clayton didn't go to the barn. Instead, he carried his wife over the threshold of the cabin they had worked together to make a home. Their coming together was tender, passionate, a culmination of months of growing love. After, as they lay tangled in each other's arms, Anna traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "Thank you," she whispered. Clayton caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "For what?" "For bringing me seed and tools and hope when I had nothing but Maybelle and a broken heart." His eyes, so blue in the moonlight streaming through the window, held hers. "You never had nothing, Anna. You had courage and determination. All I did was remind you of that." She smiled, resting her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Either way, I'm grateful you found me." "I think," he murmured, his fingers combing gently through her hair, "we found each other." The summer passed in a blur of hard work and joy. The crops flourished under their care, and by August the wheat stood golden and ready for harvest. Clayton built a small addition to the cabin, a room that might someday belong to a child, though they didn't speak of it directly. In September, exactly 1 year after Thomas had fallen ill, Anna stood at his grave beneath the pine tree. She placed a single wildflower on the mound of earth, now covered with grass. "I hope you understand," she said softly. "I'll always remember you, always honor what we had, but I've found love again and happiness." As she spoke, she felt a presence behind her and turned to find Clayton standing a respectful distance away. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said. Anna shook her head, reaching out her hand to him. "You're not intruding. I was just saying goodbye properly this time." Clayton took her hand, standing beside her at the grave. "He must have been a good man to have earned your love." "He was," Anna agreed. "Different from you, but good in his way. He would be glad to know the homestead will continue, that his dream didn't die with him." They stood together in silence for a moment, honoring the past while embracing their future. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Anna rested her head on Clayton's shoulder. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand and placing it over her stomach. Clayton went very still, then turned to look at her, wonder dawning in his eyes. "Anna, are you?" She nodded, smiling through sudden tears. "We're going to have a baby come spring." His whoop of joy startled a flock of birds from a nearby tree. He lifted her in his arms, spinning her around before carefully setting her back on her feet. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with awe. "Our baby. Our baby," Anna confirmed, laughing at his exuberance. Clayton knelt before her, pressing his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he whispered. "Your mama and I can't wait to meet you." The tenderness of the moment brought fresh tears to Anna's eyes. She ran her fingers through Clayton's hair, overwhelmed by the love she felt for this man who had brought so much to her life. Winter came again, but this time Anna faced it without fear. The cabin was warm and secure, the barn full of hay for Maybelle and the 2 horses Clayton had purchased with the proceeds from their first harvest. They had food stored, firewood stacked high, and each other. As Anna's body changed, growing round with their child, Clayton treated her with a reverence that sometimes made her laugh. "I'm not made of glass," she protested one evening as he insisted on carrying water from the well. "I know," he replied, setting down the bucket. "But you're carrying precious cargo." She softened at that, reaching up to touch his face. "You're going to be a wonderful father." "I hope so," he said, a flash of vulnerability crossing his features. "I never knew my own father well. He died when I was young." "You'll know what to do," Anna assured him. "Just as you knew what to do when you found a widow with nothing but a cow." He smiled at that, pulling her into his arms. "Best decision I ever made, stopping at your homestead that day." The baby arrived on a clear April morning, just as the first shoots of wheat were pushing through the soil once more. After hours of labor with the help of Mrs. Peterson, who had become a friend over the passing months, Anna gave birth to a healthy son. "He has your eyes," she told Clayton as he held their son for the first time, his large hands cradling the tiny bundle with infinite care. "And your determination," Clayton replied, watching in amazement as the infant gripped his finger. "He came into the world ready to take on everything." They named him Thomas Clayton Keller, honoring both the past and the present. Little Thomas thrived, growing strong on his mother's milk, his curious eyes taking in the world around him. By his first birthday, he was toddling around the cabin, exploring everything within reach. Clayton had expanded the garden, and the first roses were beginning to bloom, their delicate pink petals unfurling in the spring sunshine. "Look, Thomas," Anna would say, carrying her son to see the flowers. "Aren't they beautiful?" The homestead prospered. They added a small orchard, planted more wheat, and began building a proper house to replace the cabin that had served them well, but was growing too small for their expanding family. In the summer of Thomas's second year, Anna discovered she was expecting again. Clayton's joy was, if possible, even greater than the first time. "Another baby," he marveled, his hand on her stomach. "Do you think it's a boy or a girl?" "A girl, I think," Anna replied. "To even things out." She was right. The following spring, Eliza Jane Keller joined their family, a tiny, dark-haired beauty with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. As the years passed, the Keller homestead became one of the most successful in the area. Clayton's knowledge of farming, combined with Anna's steady practicality, allowed them to weather the challenges that came: drought, early frost, the fluctuations of crop prices. They added to their home as their family grew. After Eliza came William, then Sarah, each child a new blessing in a life rich with love and purpose. Maybelle, the cow who had once been Anna's only possession, lived to a ripe old age, eventually retiring from milk production to spend her days grazing peacefully in the pasture behind the barn. When she finally passed, the whole family mourned her as the beloved family member she was. On the 10th anniversary of their marriage, Clayton took Anna on a picnic to the spot where they had first acknowledged their growing feelings for each other. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked as they sat beneath the shade of a cottonwood tree, taking a chance on a wandering cowboy who showed up with some seed and tools. Anna looked out over their land, the fields of wheat rippling in the breeze, the orchard heavy with fruit, the garden bursting with vegetables and flowers. In the distance, their home stood solid and welcoming, their children playing in the yard under the watchful eye of Thomas, now old enough to be trusted with his siblings for short periods. "Never," she said with certainty, turning back to the man who had brought love back into her life when she thought it lost forever. "Not for a single moment." Clayton took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm just as he had on their wedding night. "Nor I. Every day with you is a gift, Anna Keller." "As is every day with you," she replied, leaning against his shoulder. Together, they watched the sun begin its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors. From the depths of grief, through hard work and unwavering hope, they had built something beautiful: a home, a family, a life filled with love. And it had all begun with a widow, a cow, and a cowboy who brought seeds, tools, and the hope of a new beginning.